Welcome, Pod.
Welcome back into TCM Pod. Chris Mathis, Spencer Mathis coming off of an exciting weekend in the NFL Draft 2024. We've got our winners, our losers, and one team that I thought really crushed it here in this year's draft, Spence. But a lot that went on over the weekend, of course, with the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, too. The Bolts were able to finally win one in Game 4 over the Florida Panthers. Still wasn't pretty, but a win is a win is a win. And some NFL teams did not have any wins over the weekend, headlined by where the majority of our fan base is located. And one might say they are angry. If I read your shirt correctly, I think it says angry on there.
Yep.
Yeah, angry. You know what?
They don't have this guy.
Oh, Baker. Is that Baker?
It's Baker.
Angry Baker. That's sick right there. I don't know where. Did you get that from me?
Angry Runs, Baker Mayfield.
Oh, that's sick. That's great. All right, so I'm Chris Mathis here at the WDAE iHeartRadio studio. Spencer Mathis back there in North Georgia, coming at you live. Spence, first and foremost, before we get more into the draft, how would you kind of summarize, your thoughts on this year's NFL draft, how much you kept up with the draft, and expectations heading into the draft?
Yeah, the NFL draft kind of went as expected. I think as it got closer and closer, I would say probably a month out, we thought, hey, the NFL draft may have 4 quarterbacks going in the first round. And then I think one of the teams that definitely had the worst draft in the Atlanta Falcons kind of sped up the draft process with quarterbacks, because who was it that had already gone? It was Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and then they drafted Michael Penix Jr. And then from there on out, McCarthy was within the next 2 picks. And then you had, of course, the quarterback Bo Nix from Oregon as the 6th quarterback taken in just the first round. So I think a run on quarterbacks was way too fast this year. But again, this was a year where you kind of look at the next season's draft, and the top quarterback kind of headlining that draft is going to be Shedeur Sanders. Do you think that he's a real NFL top quarterback like these guys? No. So you kind of just take your pick this year and you go with one of those guys. But the one that just didn't make sense was obviously the guy that you're showing right now. We'll get into that in a little bit, but the draft kind of went as expected, as it does. And we're going to look back at the 2024 quarterback draft, and we're going to look at it in the exact same light that we look at the 2021 draft, because a lot of these guys aren't going to pan out. It happens every single year. It's going to be interesting to see how Bo Nix does with Sean Payton, how, of course, J.J. McCarthy does with the Vikings. It's going to be a fun thing to watch. But again, I think Drake May went a little bit later than what I expected. Obviously, they were already saying, hey, Caleb Williams is 1. That was a given. But again, Jaden Daniels being number 2, I think those 2 really could have flip-flopped, and the Commanders went with a more athletic guy. But Drake May, even C.J. Stroud said it, the most ready quarterback from last season. C.J. Stroud came in, threw only 5 interceptions his rookie season, absolutely dominated. And he said himself that Drake May was the most NFL-ready quarterback heading into this draft. And for him to go number 3 overall to a franchise that really needs a quarterback was a bit shocking. For the Commanders to not go out there and snag him at number 2, or maybe even trade down to 3 and see what the Commanders would have done anyway. So just an interesting choice by the Washington Commanders. I think that was kind of already set in stone, though. But again, the run on quarterbacks was just a shock. Didn't expect them to all go in the first 12. And the next quarterback that got drafted was Spencer Rattler in the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
In the 5th. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, no doubt. And you look at the run on quarterbacks that you mentioned, 6 quarterbacks went in the first, 12 draft picks, including Denver being the last there, with Bo Nix out of Oregon going to Sean Payton and co. I didn't like that pick. I'll get more into that one as we progress here with the podcast. Check us out on social media at TCM_pod. Make sure to hit follow, like, and subscribe. Leave your comment down below before we share ours. Who were your winners and losers? Maybe you have 3 teams. Maybe you have the Detroit Lions with their draft, which I thought they had a really good draft. That was a team that was definitely mentioned as one of my favorite drafts. However, they are not actually my favorite. I'll get to that momentarily. When you talk about this year's NFL draft, I thought that there was a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the first round and a half or so. I believe 23 out of 32 draft picks in that first round, Spence, were offensive players. Now, I know that we've always heard the phrase that Super Bowls and championships are won with the defensive side of the ball. Do you still believe that to be the case? A guy here at DAE, Nick Wise, says offense wins championship these days. And if there is any truth to that, it makes sense as far as looking at this year's draft in the first round.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, I think it was the first 16 players drafted in this year's draft were offensive players. I think it may have already gotten all the way to Dallas Turner at number 17. This guy was a projected top 10 pick, maybe even top 5. We didn't even see him go till pick number 17. The Vikings traded up to get him. He could have fallen even further depending on who the Vikings traded with. Again, just a very, very, very offensive heavy draft. And I believe Nick Wise is correct in that statement saying offense wins championships at this point. Obviously, you want to kind of load your defense, get a good pass rush. But at this point, that's kind of the only thing. Pass rushers go really early. That's the only defensive position that's really going to hit within the first 20 picks. And then you see a run on quarterbacks. I believe the first cornerback was taken 22nd or so overall. And I think there were 6 within the next 15 picks heading into the second round. So defensive line is really the only defensive position that you kind of want to go with. Offense, though, I believe wins championships at this point. And I think the Atlanta Falcons thought the exact same thing.
Philadelphia was the team to take the first corner off the board at 22 with Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, which I love the pick. I don't know if he was my number 1 guy going into the draft. However, he was arguably 1, 2, or 3 as far as quarterbacks are concerned, and the Eagles continue to get stacked up there in the secondary. 2 years ago, that defense was exceptional. Last year, a lot going on in terms of inconsistencies, and then you add in a guy such as Devin White, who's extremely talented and has a lot of potential, but his average and what you see constantly from him is that lack of effort, lack of motor, and questions regarding his drive and his passion, his dedication to the sport. And then the Eagles go again with another corner and Cooper DeJean out of Iowa in the second round, early in the second round of pick 40, which also was another great pick. So the defense, the rich get richer there with Philadelphia in that defense. They could arguably be one of your favorite draft picks or one of your favorite teams here in the draft as far as who won the draft. I don't know, Spence, do you want to get into our worst first or our best first? Or do you want to talk about the Buccaneers and their draft? Maybe they're your favorite. Maybe they're the worst in your opinion.
Let's go with the worst first and then save the best for last. Let's go worst and then best. And then obviously I think Buccaneers right afterwards. So what I just said, just completely scratch that. But again, I'm going to go with the worst team in this NFL draft being the Atlanta Falcons. I think one word describes the fan base as that pick was taken. Just an absolute shock at number 8. You could have traded back, probably got him a little bit later. But again, the thing is, you should not have taken a quarterback if you're the Atlanta Falcons. They just signed Kirk Cousins, $185 million contract for 4 years. Obviously, it's kind of a 2-year guarantee for Kirk Cousins. But they decided to go with Michael Penix at number 8. A lot of glaring holes on that defensive line. They could have used some extra secondary help to help Jesse Bates back there. I mean, they had a great defense last season, but there's still a lot of things you can do. And another guy that I really like in this draft that could have just bolstered that offense even more, that aerial assault with Kirk Cousins, is Rome Odunze. He's an absolute tank, and he kind of fell the next pick after the Atlanta Falcons. So the Falcons, the general consensus with Atlanta Falcons fans are saying, as soon as that draft pick was taken, why would we draft a quarterback that's not going to play for at least 2 seasons? He's already 24 by the time the season starts. Why are we drafting a quarterback right now whenever they have a chance to win the NFC South? I think adding Kirk Cousins puts them right up there with the Buccaneers, but they needed another offensive weapon or a defensive lineman. Dallas Turner was there. They could have traded back 7 picks and got Dallas Turner. Instead, it's Michael Penix Jr. at number 8. I actually laughed as soon as the draft pick was taken. A complete shock. I don't think anyone was reporting that, not even himself. Michael Penix was shocked whenever the Atlanta Falcons called him, and just an absolute terrible choice by the Atlanta Falcons. And that really is what tanks their draft grade, because at number 8, you need a premier position that you're gonna use. It's best player available, but Michael Penix Jr. was not the best player available at number 8. He was the number 4 quarterback taken in this year's draft for a reason. Could have been number 5 before Bo Nix. I think he's a little bit better than Bo Nix, but again, they didn't need a quarterback. They get Michael Penix Jr. They followed up with Rook Arorojo, is how you say his name. I saw a lot of things about him. Pretty good choice. And then they had a 3rd-round pick. They got another edge, so they did at least address what they needed to. But with that 1st-round pick, if they would have ended up with Dallas Turner or another wide receiver and Rome Odunze from Washington, instead you draft the quarterback, well, it just makes no sense. And that's why Atlanta, for me at least, is the absolute worst draft. And it's just based off of 1 pick alone, because 1 pick, a 1st-round pick, can really destroy your draft grade. And that's exactly what the Atlanta Falcons did as soon as they announced that Michael Penix Jr. is going to be on their bench for 4 to 5 seasons, and that's the best case scenario.
And you talk about the Falcons and it's solely being based upon 1 pick. Also, Spence, they did lack taking one particular position they needed help on, and that was a cornerback. They did not draft a cornerback whatsoever in this year's draft, and that was a shock to me because they have AJ Terrell, but that's it. On the other side, they don't have anybody. They don't have anybody that's respectable. One of those guys that's not even a lockdown or shutdown corner. That's asking for a lot, but a guy who could be looked upon as a number 2 or number 3 corner. He's just not that. They don't have that on this year's roster. I did like Braylon Trice in the 3rd round, the outside linebacker. I thought that was a good pick. They did address the defensive line and Brandon Dorless there in the 4th round. Went linebacker again, drafted a running back again. 6th round draft pick running back. I don't know if I would have taken a running back either, Spence. They have a couple of running backs already there in Atlanta, 2 guys that have proven themselves to being a 1-2 punch, and they go draft a running back in the 6th round. At least in the 6th round, at least get a body in that cornerback room. But the pick for Michael Penix Jr. was unbelievable. And when you see that draft pick being made and all the Falcon fans across the country, including the Pugh brothers, get upset over the draft pick, it was a shock to me. And then to see Terry Fontenot, their general manager, talking with the owner, Arthur Blank, and trying to plead his case, plead the decision there as far as, hey, here's why I did what I did. Here's what we did. And I would like to think there was some communication there, but I don't know if there was. I don't know at what point. Now, allegedly, the comments were they don't foresee them, at least with Kirk Cousins being the starting quarterback, being in a position in the next 3 or 4 years to take a quarterback that high. I understand that, and if he is great and he pans out like they hope, okay, they're right in a sense. However, you're not there yet to win these games. You're not in that position to win those games. You are missing a few pieces on offense, missing another receiver, and instead they get a guy who sits on the bench and a guy who's older, and by the time it is his maybe go at it, he's 27 years old and he's a left-handed quarterback. So then you're having to build up your right side of the offensive line.
With no money.
Yeah, no money. So I don't understand. I mean, you look at Kyle Pitts, he's going to be due for a contract soon. By then, Bijan Robinson will be up for a contract. Absolutely no good decision here by the Atlanta Falcons. And Raheem Morris, kind of the catalyst of it all, really. And I love the guy. I wanted to wish him well here, even though I grew up a Buccaneer fan. I just don't think that they put themselves in a situation to not only win the division, but compete in this division. I think it was a terrible draft by the Atlanta Falcons, and it wasn't even my worst draft. I think it is arguably the worst. However,
worst pick, at least. And I think that tanks so much of your draft.
Worst pick for sure.
But again, it's just interesting that they decided to go with the quarterback with the glaring issues that they have. And people are comparing it. Even I don't know if it was a general manager, but one of the guys on the Atlanta Falcons coaching staff or within their little ring compared it to the Jordan Love situation. But think of the Jordan Love situation. Go back 4 years to whenever that draft pick was taken. People were upset. But again, the Atlanta Falcons didn't even win the NFC South last season. The Green Bay Packers were in the NFC Championship whenever they drafted Jordan Love as Aaron Rodgers' potential successor. You haven't even seen what Kirk Cousins can do for you, Atlanta. Why are you drafting a quarterback? Why are you already drafting the successor? Kirk Cousins was taken aback immediately once he saw that pick. He's like, why am I already training somebody to be the next guy if I haven't even taken a snap for you guys yet? And the Green Bay Packers had at least a little bit of a reason. The Atlanta Falcons had none because I think they ended up maybe they may have even been 3rd place in the NFC South last year. And they had a lot of issues and nowhere close to the Jordan Love situation. And I obviously think that Falcons fans know that. I haven't really seen any Falcons fans trying to defend it, but that GM has really done his work. And Arthur Blank, I still don't think that he saw eye to eye with Fontenot.
I don't think so either. And I think it showed in that video right after the pick was made and it was announced. You saw it right there on the NFL Network. It just did not look like they were on the same page. They're going to have to deal with that. You know, they were 1 or 2 wins away from winning the NFC South Division last year. This holds them back. This reminds me a lot of the Buccaneers with Tom Brady and Kyle Trask. You're looking to go back-to-back, and instead of taking a player that could help you win right now, you take a potential protege quarterback, or I don't know if I said that properly, but anyway, a quarterback there in the 2nd round in Kyle Trask, and it was a terrible pick. And me as a Buc fan, me as a reporter for the Buccaneers, I thought it was an awful decision at the time, and it turned out to be an even worse decision because since then the Buccaneers have proven they don't believe in Kyle Trask. So not only did he sit there and take away from that team winning potentially back-to-back Super Bowls, but also he doesn't play whatsoever. He does not play football.
Exactly. And we were upset, and that's the end of the 2nd round. The Falcons have that pick, and that's a top 10 pick. That's one that you really don't miss unless you're drafting a quarterback. And guess what? They don't need a quarterback, and they drafted a quarterback that could miss. I just didn't see any reasoning behind that. Atlanta, I mean, you can always use an offensive lineman. There were still a lot of good offensive linemen left. A weapon for them on the offensive side of the football, like a wide receiver or anything like that, would have been kind of just adding fuel to the fire for them because, I mean, they've already got a pretty good offense and the quarterback's going to change a lot. But they could have drafted any other position besides a kicker and a punter, and it would have done more than what Michael Penix will do in Atlanta in his first 2 seasons at least.
And, we talk about these losers, Spence. The Atlanta Falcons had by far the worst pick in this year's draft of Michael Penix Jr. And it's no disrespect to Michael Penix Jr. I think he has potential to be something special in the NFL. I don't think he's a top 8 pick worthy guy. I do think he was a top 3 or 4 quarterback in this year's draft. But the team for me that was the biggest loser was a team that also took a quarterback after missing out on their quarterback last year and Russell Wilson. And it's the Denver Broncos and taking Bo Nix. I don't like the pick. I never would have liked this pick. You're talking about a guy who struggled in the SEC with Bo Nix, then goes out to a different conference, dominates, but he's much older than everybody else there. He had a lot of weapons. He had 3 wide receivers go early in this year's draft, not first round, but top 3 rounds out there, I believe, in Oregon. I just did not like the decision here by Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos to take Bo Nix as early as they did at number 12. If you think that's the guy, maybe trade out of pick 12 and drop down a bit because the Raiders were probably going to go Brock Bowers no matter what. The Saints already had a quarterback. The Colts followed them at pick 15. They went with an edge rusher. Seattle already has a quarterback. You could have dropped down to 16. Minnesota maybe would have been that next team, but they already took the quarterback at pick 10. So I think Denver really screwed up by taking Bo Nix without trading back to try to at least get a 3rd or 4th round draft pick in this year's draft and then take Bo Nix a little bit later.
Yeah, I don't like Bo Nix either, and I think that goes back to what I said earlier with the next year's crop of quarterbacks doesn't look great. And you know what this pick reminds me of is Brandon Weeden in 2012 with the Cleveland Browns. The quarterbacks that had already gone are generational players, or at least they should have been. I mean, Andrew Luck probably would have been a Hall of Famer if he finished out his career. RG3 would have been really good if he wouldn't have gone through with the injuries. Cam Newton had been picked the year before. I mean, you had seen so many good quarterbacks in a row, so the Browns thought, hey, let's take a chance. Maybe we land one of those guys. They get a more experienced, really good college football player who's played a lot of games. Guess what? Bo Nix has started the most games in college football history at the quarterback position. This is a Brandon Weeden type situation. Obviously, he's going to be more experienced, but I think that something that kind of jumps off the charts here is that he wasn't even held as the most NFL-ready quarterback. He's been in college for 6 seasons, and he's not even the most NFL-ready quarterback. Drake May is. So it just doesn't make much sense. And the thing that Sean Payton said with how he tried to trick another team into thinking that he was going to trade up, guess what, Sean Payton? You still end up with the worst out of the 6 quarterbacks. And obviously, it's a toss-up between him and Michael Penix. But again, I thought that was just a funny statement by Sean Payton. Very unlikable coach, so I'm happy to see it. But just I don't know if it's really going to pan out. Bo Nix is one of those guys that I think is the product of being a lot older in college football and kind of playing his best. The thing with Michael Penix, he's the same age, but he missed 2 seasons with torn ACLs, and he's got injury issues, man. Terrible injury issues. And you've already got a quarterback who just tore his Achilles. Let's get in a guy who had finally a good season last year, who's torn his ACL twice. He's gone through so many different things. He's missed at least 2 full seasons, games throughout his career in college football, and you pick him with number 8. So those 2 choices, I like the overall Denver Broncos draft. But again, I think that's another situation where just that first-round pick can really tank your draft. And I've seen a lot of people saying the Broncos' overall draft was like a B or so. And I didn't really look at every other position, but like kind of like what you just went with, the quarterback can tank a draft. And I think the Atlanta Falcons and the Denver Broncos jumped the gun on their quarterbacks.
You look at Bo Nix and his stats here in college football. At Oregon in the Pac-12, he had, 64, 14. You're looking at 74 passing touchdowns to 10 picks. He has 113 career passing touchdowns. So 74, you're looking at about 29, 39 other passing touchdowns throughout 3 years. And then also you're looking at 16 of his 26 career interceptions came in his first 3 years, all of which were in the SEC, which is most comparable to the NFL, but still not even close to the NFL. He really struggled with completion percentage, averaging about 59% in the SEC. Then he goes to Oregon and he averages about 76%. So huge jump there. The numbers prove it. His quarterback rating nearly double. I mean, it just doesn't add up to me. He had so much playing time and experience. He was a year older than most guys in this year's draft class. I just do not like the pick for the Denver Broncos there at 12. If they would have traded down to pick 17 and maybe acquired a 4th-round pick or something, okay, not so bad. But I did not like this decision by the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton. And you miss out on Russell Wilson. Yes, he wasn't great, but see him go to Pittsburgh on such a cheap deal. they have to be kicking themselves. They have to be. I would be, no doubt about it. So let's talk about a couple of winners, Spence, as we are running up against the end of this podcast here. It is the Chris Mathis podcast at TCM_pod. Spencer Mathis, Chris Mathis here with you guys. As always, the biggest winner in this year's draft was...
I'm going to go with the Chicago Bears. They had a total of 4 draft picks in this year's draft. They ended up trading back in, getting one more. Their first round looked really good, though. Caleb Williams, obviously the consensus first overall pick. Character concerns, but his on-field potential is the best out of any quarterback. And the NFL is the best place to go to get coached up. You've seen it with Patrick Mahomes. He has crazy arm talent, little bit shaky in the pocket, but he's the number 1 overall pick for a reason. And then Rome Odunze from Washington, a very good wide receiver, and I think he's the best wide receiver in the whole draft. Marvin Harrison Jr., very, very, very good. But again, I really like Odunze transitioning to the NFL. Harrison Jr. is going to be super good, but I just thought that was a weird choice by the Cardinals. They've really thrown in all their eggs into one basket with Kyler Murray, and it seemed like just maybe even a year or two ago, they were kind of ready to move on from Kyler Murray. So just a weird thing for me. I really like Rome Odunze, and then they ended up getting the best punter in all of college football out of Iowa. Just one of the punters that you can tell can just play at the next level. They got him in the 4th round, pretty high up there for a punter. But with Chicago Bears, with the rookie quarterback, you're going to need your punter to play good. They've got a good defense. The Bears may shock a lot of people this year. If Caleb Williams can really develop heading into the NFL season, it's going to be super good. And that first round really looks good for the Chicago Bears. And the rest of the draft I like as well. Protecting you with your 3rd overall pick. Just a good draft altogether by the Bears. It's going to come down to coaching, though, like it always does.
Yeah, no doubt. And for me, that's one thing I do worry about is they still have Matt Eberflus at the helm. I don't think he's a great head coach. I think he's very fortunate and lucky. I think lucky is the key word for him to still be a head coach. And I know they won, 7 games last year inconsistently. They put on a little run near the mid to the end of the season. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't feel like that guy is capable of being an NFL head coach. And I don't think he's going to last there much with Caleb Williams unless Caleb comes in and lights the National Football League on fire.
They're going to need it.
They're going to need it, no doubt about it. They do have key pieces around them. For me, the winner was, and it's a team that's, I think, still getting overlooked. It's a team that's really addressing a position that they needed. They come off as world champions, and that, of course, being the Kansas City Chiefs, drafting a phenomenal wide receiver in this year's draft, and Xavier Worthy, hands down the fastest wide receiver in this year's draft. They picked him relatively late, pick 28. It was a traded pick from Buffalo. Xavier Worthy out of Texas. This guy is a speedster. Oh, yeah. Not only that, he can also help out quite a bit in the return game with special teams and the new kickoff rule as well. So I think it's a hell of a pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs made it so far with a team that had Justin Watson as their number 2 guy. Rashee Rice right there, who probably won't play much this year, in my opinion. I don't think he deserves to. And then Kadarius Toney. They still not only won the AFC, not only made it to the Super Bowl, but they won the Super Bowl with that scrub group of wide receivers that consistently drop balls. Then you get Xavier Worthy in. This is a younger Tyreek Hill if he does translate his college football game from Texas to the NFL. Kansas City, they're going back. They are going back right here, right now. I'm going to call it. This pick right here is the one best pick. It sounds crazy, but it was the best solo pick in this year's draft. When you think of the quarterback and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce coming back, if he's healthy, Isaiah Pacheco, really good. And guess what? The mastermind of it all there in Kansas City, Andy Reid, still the head coach last time I checked.
Yeah, he's going to be fun in that offense. It may take a year for him to fully develop. But like you said, the Chiefs are going back to the Super Bowl next season, at least the AFC Championship, and they may be the first team to do it. Not going to say it, but they may be the first team to do it, especially if Rashee Rice gets to play. Lucky for him, best case scenario happened. Nobody died in the car crash. Mm-hmm. But again, anybody else, if that happens to anybody else that's not an NFL player, they're in prison right now. So kind of hope that the justice gets to him. But I do like Xavier Worthy. They also got a defensive back to replace L'Jarius Sneed that a lot of people were raving about pretty late in the draft. And I do like
I believe Kamal Haddon.
Yes, I do like the Chiefs overall. I mean, I think on the Taz score, he was up there as like one of the top 20 of all time in total athletic score.
And then also you look at their draft, 2nd round draft pick, Kingsley Samatea, offensive tackle out of BYU, protect Patrick Mahomes even more. So huge get there by the Chiefs. You protect the most valuable asset in the league, help him stay upright. Then you take a tight end in the 4th round of Jared Wiley out of TCU. This team's not only building to win right now and keep up their success, but also building for the future as well. We just don't know with Taylor Swift, with Travis Kelce and this love story, if it will come to an end, because it could be a cruel summer if things come crashing down.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. I think we're working on something here. And then Tampa Bay, I think Tampa Bay a sleeper for one of the best drafts. I do. I think Jason Light absolutely won not only the offseason, but also the draft too. I think you could have said them as well. When you think about the positions just alone that they were able to fulfill in this year's draft, they had a center to help bolster up the offensive line, and Graham Barton out of Duke, Chris Braswell out of Alabama, great edge rusher. Needs to work on some things in the run game, but as far as pass attack and trying to blitz the quarterback, extremely good. Tyke Smith out of Georgia, a defensive back that can do it all. Jalen McMillan, who is fourth in all of college football over the last 2 years and receiving yards out of the slot. They add a running back to a young running back room, and Bucky Irving out of Oregon, which I know that's a guy you're pretty high on, Spence.
Oh, yeah.
Elijah Clean.
Good receiving back, too.
Elijah Klein out of UTEP. Yep, he's out there. And then they got a tight end as well, which is another position. I think I probably would have went with a linebacker there later in the draft than a tight end. But, hey, the Bucs overall, a really, really good draft there for Jason Light and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, and they signed one from Florida State University in the undrafted free agency process. But, again, Graham Barton is going to be really good for the Buccaneers. They rave about how smart he is. He's going to be a center. Obviously, getting to move Hainsey back to his normal position. I think he's a little bit too light in the ass, as Bruce Arians would put it, to play the center position. Chris Braswell led all of the SEC in pressures last year behind the guy that he played. I mean, just unreal. Not even a starter. Had 8.5 sacks, 57 pressures last season behind the first overall defensive lineman picked in this year's draft. Tyke Smith, didn't know much about him. Atlanta Falcons fans or Georgia Bulldogs fans / Atlanta Falcons fans say that they love him. Pew approved, which is huge for us.
Pew approval?
Pew approved.
Oh, wow.
That he's a dog. Eli Pew.
He's a dog? He played at Georgia.
Guys. So that's a good thing. And then Jalen McMillan, I think, is going to be a really good slot guy. It's going to push Trey Palmer to maybe get some hands as he progresses in the NFL. Bucky Irving, a receiving back who had a 26% missed tackle rate last year with Oregon, and then a small school lineman in Elijah Klein, who I think could end up being the guard position for the Buccaneers at right guard, because left guard now is filled. The offensive line looks really good next year for Tampa Bay, and that's something Baker Mayfield's really not had in his career. Then the fastest tight end in the draft, it's I think round 6 that the Buccaneers drafted him in, is Devin Culp. Ran like a 4.4 something as a 40-yard dash, really fast. Not going to be used a ton. But 6th-round pick, getting somebody that fast at a position that's usually not that quick may be interesting. And I love the Buccaneers draft. And if I wasn't sounding like so much of a homer, I may have picked them as the best draft. But, of course, I picked the Chicago Bears. But the Buccaneers, I think we're a consensus A draft grade by everywhere that I've seen. And I think that is kind of what it is every single year with a Jason Light draft. Dude's the best general manager in all of football, and he's got the Buccaneers primed with that Atlanta Falcons pick to probably win the NFC South again coming up in 2024.
Should be a great year here. This is probably one of the most exciting off seasons in the last couple of years, besides when Tom Brady came to Tampa Bay. But that was biased because I'm a Bucs fan. Also, I like Tom Brady and appreciated him too. To see him go somewhere else other than New England and kind of let loose was exciting. But this might be the best off season in quite a long time. I really do think so. That is TCM Pod. Spencer Mathis, Chris Mathis filling in here. As always, thank you guys for streaming us, commenting down below, hitting the like button, also tapping subscribe too. We do appreciate you.